Welcome back to another episode. In today's video, I'll be sharing all the questions and answers from my TikTok channel this past week. In the description, you can find the timestamp that will jump to any question that you're interested in hearing the answer for. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and please enjoy. The only question I have is, how is she going to know when to stay when you're only saying yes for the dog to stay? First, we need to understand marker training, and there are two markers that we use that predict positive reinforcement. The first one is the continuation marker. I like to use the word yes. This is a word or sound that lets the dog know that they are correct and they will be delivered a reward. It's called a continuation marker because unlike the terminal marker, it doesn't release the dog. Meaning if your dog is in a commanded stay, you can use this marker without releasing them from the stay and allowing them to understand that they're doing the behavior correctly. However, if your dog is not in a commanded stay, then it just means that they'll be given a reward. So it often confuses people because of the terminology continuation. This is why it's easier to understand what our words mean to our dogs based on what they predict. A continuation marker predicts a reward. That's it, it doesn't change the dog's circumstances. So if the dog is in a stay, they remain in the stay. And if the dog is not in a stay, then they remain free from the stay. In contrast, we have the terminal marker. I like to use the word free. This is a release word, but it also guarantees a reward. So for example, if your dog was in a sit stay and you use the terminal marker, they are released from that position and they are guaranteed a reward for doing the behavior correctly. So if the dog's in a sit, indicating the completion of the sit. So when we give our dog a verbal command such as sit, the dog is in a sit stay. If we lure our dogs into a sit, but we don't say sit, then the dog is not in a stay. So it means when we're teaching a stay, we don't have to say stay. The stay is implied when we put our dogs into a commanded position. However, some people do feel more comfortable saying the word stay, and if that's the case with you, feel free to use the word as it will not negatively impact the training. Once in a stay, we have 3 ways of maintaining and 3 ways of releasing them. The 3 ways to maintain the stay would be 1, use the continuation marker, which predicts a reward but no release. My continuation marker again is yes. 2, provide verbal praise, verbal feedback to let the dog know they are doing the behavior correctly. Or 3, you say nothing at all. The 3 ways to release the dog from the stay would be 1, use a release word, which lets the dog know they can get up, but it doesn't guarantee a reward. I use the word break. 2, use the terminal marker, which predicts release and reward. My terminal marker is free. Or 3, give the dog a new command. I hope this answered your question, and this one is in reference to my YouTube video titled Easily Teach Your Dog the Stay Command. And if you want to learn more about marker training, check out my YouTube video titled Marker Dog Training and the 4 Quadrants of Opera Conditioning. Thanks for watching. What happens when you have 2 siblings? Do you train them at the same time or one at a time? If I have 2 dogs that live together that need to be trained, then I start by training each one separately. We have to look at another dog the same way we would any other distraction. Remember, when we're training our dogs with reward-based training, we're competing with everything else in the dog's environment. This is why the ideal first training location is a completely empty room. Basically, it's a good idea to gradually introduce your dog to increasingly challenging environments, such as another dog in the room and levels of obedience training. This includes the levels of the task, levels of obedience, levels of proficiency, and the intensity of the dog's environment. Without being aware of these guidelines, you could be in for a lot of problems during your training. For example, don't ask for an advanced task from a dog that is still at a lower proficiency level in a high intense environment. You'd be setting yourself and the pup up for failure. On the flip side, if you're just starting your training and you're at a low obedience level, then start in a low-key environment using beginner tasks, such as engagement training or luring. So before training both dogs together, make sure each dog knows and understands all of their communication channels. This means that you've done engagement training with both dogs, luring, and leash pressure training. Then start working on simple tasks in low intensity environments. For example, I always like to start with the climb stay, also known as the bed stay. since it's such an easy exercise that doesn't require much training. As your dogs are successful, slowly increase the difficulty of the tasks as well as the environment. And if you notice that you have progressed too quickly, you can always go back a step in the training. If you want to learn more about this subject, check out my video on YouTube titled Socializing and Training Your Dog with Distractions. Thanks again for watching. Is it okay to toss your dog a treat after giving them the continuation marker as opposed to handing it to them? Yes and no, since it depends on the situation. Basically, if your dog is in a stay command and you use your continuation marker, then you wouldn't want to toss the treat unless you're 100% sure that your dog will catch the treat and that your dog won't break the stay to retrieve the treat if he or she had missed it. However, if your dog is not in a stay and you use your continuation marker, then you can throw the treat since your dog wouldn't be in a stay to break. To make things more clear, let's break down the two markers that predict rewards. The first one is the continuation marker. I like to use the word yes. This is a word or sound that lets the dog know that they are correct and they will be delivered a reward. It's called a continuation marker because unlike the terminal marker, it doesn't release the dog, meaning if your dog is in a commanded stay, you can use this marker without releasing the dog from the stay. However, if your dog is not in a commanded stay, then this marker just means that they'll be rewarded. Therefore, this often confuses people because of the terminology continuation. This is why it's easier to understand what it predicts. A continuation marker predicts a reward. That's it. It doesn't change the circumstances. So if the dog's in a stay, they must remain in the stay. And if the dog is not in the stay, then they remain free from the stay. In contrast, we have the terminal marker. I like to use the word free. This releases the dog from the commanded position as well as guarantees them a reward. So if your dog was in a sit stay and you used your terminal marker, then they are released from that position and will be given a reward, indicating that the sit behavior is completed. If you want to learn more about markers and how to use them, I'd recommend checking out my YouTube video titled Marker Dog Training and the 4 Quadrants of Opera Conditioning. Thanks again for watching. What are your thoughts on starting and training your own service dog? This question is in reference to my YouTube video titled First 10 Steps When Training a Service Dog. Yes, of course, it is possible for someone to train their own service dog if they take the proper steps and put in the work. One of the first and most significant mistakes that most people make when training their own service dog is that they start with the wrong dog. For some reason, people have this belief that they can train any dog to be a service dog, which is far from accurate. Now, any breed can be a service dog, but that doesn't mean that every dog has what it takes to be a service dog. For example, when we were filming Rescue Dog to Super Dog for Animal Planet, we spent months visiting every shelter daily in the Los Angeles area to find the right dogs. And even after all of that, some of the ones that were selected still didn't end up making the cut. If you're going to train your own service dog, take the time to find the right dog. And your highest chance of success would be to get a dog from a breeder that specifically breeds for service dog purposes. The second mistake is that they don't have the time required to put into training their own service dog. It's not always the difficulty of the training where people fail, but rather the lack of time invested into the training process. I saw the same thing when I was an instructor at the Tom Rose School for professional dog trainers. The students that didn't do well was often because they didn't put in the time. It takes a lot of time, dedication, and commitment when it comes to training a service dog. Lastly, if you're going to train your own service dog, you should be recording and reviewing your training sessions. As I mentioned in other videos, this will help you identify and fix mistakes that you would have never noticed otherwise. In addition, you can send that footage to a professional that can help guide and direct you to increase your chances of success. If you want to learn about the proven step-by-step process to teach your dog any command, check out my video on YouTube titled Everything You Need to Know to Train Your Dog. Thanks for watching. Any ideas on keeping an anxious 90-pound lab calm in the vehicle? I muzzle him because he chewed on my seatbelt, but he won't lay down and relax. Hem treats don't work. Tried crating, but it made it worse. If we have a dog that is nervous, anxious, aggressive, or fearful about something, then our best friend is going to be counter conditioning and desensitization. As defined by the Animal Humane Society, counter conditioning means training an animal to display a behavior that is different than its current reaction to a stimulus. Desensitization is the process of exposing the animal to a stimulus beginning at a very low intensity. Counter conditioning and desensitization need to be used together to be effective and are often used to change unwanted behaviors in dogs and cats, especially fearful and aggressive behaviors. I would start by gradually introducing my dog to the vehicle and having it predict something pleasant, perhaps through training, using it as a climb and a stay command. I would do this for a week or so without actually taking my dog anywhere in the car. The following week, I would take very short drives around the neighborhood, quickly returning back to the house. Or if you have a park nearby, I would drive my dog to the park and I would play a game that my dog enjoys, such as fetch or tug, while incorporating the dog's obedience. By doing this every day, we would be changing what the car means to the dog by changing what it predicts. Basically, you want the dog to end up enjoying the vehicle because it almost always guarantees something that adds value to the dog's life, instead of something that adds stress. If you want to learn more about this, check out my video on YouTube titled Confidence Building, Counter Conditioning, and Desensitization. Thanks for watching. Is it normal for a 7-month-old Pitsky to still be biting? Yes, it's normal if the puppy enjoys biting. This would be considered a self-reinforcing behavior. When puppies under the age of 6 months bite, it's usually due to the puppy teething. This is why it's important for us to supply the puppy with plenty of chew toys to satisfy that intense need to chew. As I mentioned in my YouTube video, How to Stop Puppy Biting, most pups will stop teething when their adult teeth come in, usually around 6 months of age. However, if the biting has turned into a game, and the pup gets a good feeling from play biting, then it can continue well into adulthood. This isn't as bad as it may sound. If we incorporate play biting into our training, it can help teach the puppy bite restriction, if that's something that you care about, and we can control the play so it's on our terms. If I have a dog that enjoys play biting, let's say my arm, beyond 6 months of age, then I slowly start to remove the fun from the game and I redirect all the fun to a tug toy through obedience as a reward. This provides the dog with that same positive feeling that the dog had while play biting your arm. We're basically changing the dog's habit. Lastly, I start to treat the play biting as I would any other privilege, such as jumping on the furniture. It's okay when I give the dog the command, but they can't do it whenever they please. We can teach this in a very clear and stress-free way by implementing leash pressure training. And of course, if you never want your dog to play bite your arm, then don't reward it, and if it continues, your best option is to correct it out of the dog's repertoire. There's a process to this that I explain in great detail in my obedience and behavioral modification flowchart episode on my YouTube channel. Be sure to check it out, and thanks again for watching. Why is it wrong to introduce a behavior, whether using luring or physical positioning, with its verbal cue? Why is the separation required? First, it's essential to understand overshadowing as it applies to dog training. This is when 2 or more things are presented to a dog at the exact same time. Whichever is more relevant to the dog is what the dog will focus on, and the dog will completely ignore the other element. For example, saying yes at the same time we deliver the reward, or saying down at the same time we point to the ground. This is also what Ivan Pavlov proved in his famous study with dogs and his work in classical conditioning. When we're teaching our dogs a behavior, before we put it on a command, we want to make sure that we can get the dog to do the behavior every time the way that we like with the physical cue. Once that's accomplished, then we are ready to add the command. Look at it the same as questions and answers. The command is the question and the physical cue is the answer. Meaning, when we give our dogs a command, we're basically asking them a question. So when you tell your dog down, you're saying, "Hey buddy, do you know what to do when I tell you down?" And your dog says, "No, I don't know what to do when you tell me down." So then we provide them with the answer by using the physical cue. Just like you can't ask someone a question and provide them with the answer at the exact same time, We don't want to give our dog a command and the physical cue at the exact same time. They must be separated by about a half second or so. Down, then the cue. Question, then the answer. And then we continue to do this every day until one day we give our dog a command, and before we can give them the answer, they provide it for us. If you want to learn more about this, check out my YouTube video titled Dog Training: The 4 Keys to Success. Thanks for watching. Can leash pressure be taught to an 11-week-old puppy? Yes, you can teach a dog leash pressure at any age, as long as they are comfortable in their new environment and they understand the concept of luring. When it comes to working with our dogs, we want to make sure that they're happy and comfortable in their new environment before starting any training program. Basically, you never want to start obedience training with a dog that is still adjusting. The reason for this is our dogs will associate the training with however they are currently feeling. Meaning, if your puppy feels nervous or anxious and you start training them, then the puppy will associate that feeling with the training. However, once the pup is well adjusted, then you'll be ready to start your training. When working with our dogs, we want to follow the proven step-by-step process. First the markers, then the luring, and then the leash pressure. See, dogs have what's known as a classical opposition reflex. This means when we put a leash on our dogs, their instinct is to pull against it. With leash pressure training, we'll show our dogs that if they follow the leash instead of resisting it, good things will happen. In order for this to work, 2 things must take place. Once the pressure is turned on, it can't be turned off until the dog complies, and the moment the dog complies, the pressure must instantly be turned off. Traditionally, leash pressure training was considered a mildly stressful exercise. However, if the dog knows luring, then we can remove the stress entirely. Look at it this way. When we apply the pressure, we are presenting our dogs with a problem. We're saying, do you know how to turn off this pressure? And if we don't give the dog the answer, then they will cycle through different possibilities, such as resisting, biting at the leash, rolling on the ground, and so on. But if we give them the answer, then we instantly remove all of the stress, and the lure is the answer. For example, if we want to use leash pressure to get the dog into the down position, we apply the pressure first. Then once the dog feels the pressure, we lure the dog into the down position with a piece of food. Once the dog is in the position, we turn off the leash pressure, mark, and reward the behavior. If done correctly, most dogs can learn this training within 1 to 3 days. If you want to learn more about leash pressure training, I'd recommend checking out my YouTube video titled How to Use a Leash to Stop 90% of Behavioral Problems, Leash Pressure Training. Thanks again for watching. My German Shepherd is certainly conditioned to my markers. However, I'm not sure how to teach her to sit because she's learned to automatically sit and look up at me when it's time to train and not giving me a chance to teach her the sit. This is a common issue that a lot of people run into. When they're ready to teach their dog the verbal command, the dog is already sitting because they're looking up, and remember, wherever the nose goes, the butt does the opposite. So when they look up at us, they naturally sit. Now her command to sit is the word sit. Since she knows the verbal command for that, I'm gonna use the word asi. She doesn't know that. So you can see how the timing works with the command and then the physical cue that's going to get her to do the behavior. We're gonna do the backwards follow exercise to make sure that she's not already sitting before we give the command. It should look something like this. Also note, when she sits, I'm gonna use the terminal marker. For her, I taught her when I give the terminal marker to jump up and get the reward. So she will be jumping up. If you don't want your dog to jump up, just make sure you don't teach that in the beginning when you're doing the terminal marker. But for her, I've taught her to do that, so she's doing what I'm asking her to do. All right, so it should look something like this. Asi, then we lift, free, then we reward. See, there's that jump I was telling you about. And me saying free when her butt hits the ground, that's telling her she did it correctly. Asi, free. Good. Let's do a couple more. Asi, free. Good girl. Asi, free. And if you wanted your dog to maintain the position, then you can use the continuation marker. Asi, yes. And now you have your dog in the sit stay. And you're gonna continue to do this up until the point where you give your dog the command and your dog sits before you have to present the physical cue. I hope this answered your question, and thanks for watching. My 9-month-old pup has been trained with your methods and she's a superstar, except I can't stop her hassling my 16-year-old Husky. She will stop when I say leave and come away, but I would really like her to not start in the first place. Is there a way to achieve this? When dogs practice a behavior we don't like, but it's not dangerous or destructive, we have a specific process we want to follow. Based on your question, it sounds like you've already completed the first 4 steps of the process, but I'm quickly going to explain each step for those new to this training system. First, we want to work on engagement training. This encourages our dogs to become invested in the training, teaches them to focus on us, helps with operant conditioning, and teaches them 2 markers that predict positive reinforcement. The second step is to teach them the concept of luring. It's a simple process that encourages our dogs to follow our hands to get access to a reward. This gives us the ability to show our dogs multiple behaviors that we like. And since the behaviors predict a reward, it creates a strong and often lifelong positive association to the training. The third step is the concept of leash pressure, which should really be called a leash cue. Dogs have what's known as a classical opposition reflex. When we pull on the leash, they naturally resist. This training shows our dogs that following the leash will make good things happen. This helps with loose leash walking, teaching the stay command, confidence building, and showing our dogs what behaviors are not allowed without having to use a correction right away. The fourth step is to teach the dog what behaviors are unacceptable by using the first 3 steps to clearly communicate with them. So for this question, the younger dog is hassling the older dog. The moment the younger dog starts the unwanted behavior, I would say wrong, which is my marker for leash pressure, negative reinforcement. You can use whatever words you like, just be consistent. Then I would use the leash cue to direct the puppy to the preferred behavior. I would continue to do this until I said wrong and the pup stopped the behavior on their own. This would bring me to step 5. Now that the dog knows the rules, it's fair to implement a correction, positive punishment. A correction is anything the dog doesn't like, so in order for this to work, the motivation to not receive the correction must override the motivation to do the bad behavior. If you've done the first 4 steps correctly and the correction is adequate for that dog, then the behavior issue should quickly become a problem of the past. If you want to learn more about this, I would suggest watching my YouTube videos titled Everything You Need to Know to Train Your Dog and Obedience and Behavioral Modification Flowchart. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked today's episode, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And if you're interested in one-on-one help, I do offer Zoom training sessions. All the information for that will be in the description as well. Thanks again, and I'll see everyone in next week's video.